You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld here. My guest today is Doug Powell, an executive design leader, consultant, lecturer, global thought leader on design issues. Truly someone who fits the bill when it comes to defining what a design leader, a leader of design leaders, really is about. Doug, hi, Doug. First of all, how are you today?
Hi, Lou. I'm great. It's great to be back with you on the Rosenfeld Review. We had the chance to do this a few years back, and always great to speak with you.
Well, one of the things that's different this time is, first of all, you're going to be on our Design Ops Summit program. The next summit, number 9, is coming up September 10th and 11th, and Doug will be taking us home, one of our 2 featured speakers, along with Alni Figueroa. And Doug's topic is um, design ops and the next frontier, leading through unpredictable change. Everyone is talking about how everything is unpredictable these days. I hazard that it's always been true. We just had the illusion of certainty torn from our eyes. I'd be interested in your take on that. But before we go there, I describe you as a leader of design leaders. How'd you get there, Doug? What's your trajectory?
Well, started out as a designer, oddly enough, practicing as a graphic designer back in the early part of my career. Spent a number of years in a small design practice, and really those years were about doing the work, about getting really good at both delivering quality output, but also working fast, which was kind of an important aspect of that first chapter of my career. Just being able to listen to the clients, understand their needs, and to deliver on that over and over again. So I really reflect on that part of my career, even though I'm farther away from the making of design now in my current work. I still look back on that chapter of my career as being really essential. Um, Moving into the second chapter of my career, really exploring many different ways. This was different ways for design to happen. This was an era when we were getting into digital media. We were moving away from analog and print ways of doing design. And with that came a whole sort of evolution of the practice of design. And we began understanding the needs of people, of customers, of users, of audiences in different, more sophisticated ways. The whole practice of user experience design really emerged and was codified, and we began to understand that practice in a deeper way. So that was a big part of the second chapter of my career, along with some entrepreneurial ventures. So understanding business, the business side of design in a more sophisticated way, and then moving into some leadership roles, some interesting leadership roles in the third chapter of my career, starting with my leadership of the organization AIGA, the Professional Association for Design in the U.S. I'd held a number of leadership roles with that organization over the years, but ultimately became the national president and board chair of AIGA between 2011 and 2013. Which was a fascinating experience for me. Following that, had the opportunity to join IBM at a really sort of pivotal moment in that company's history, as they were making a substantial investment in growing an internal design capacity and team and program. Spent almost 9 years at IBM through a really, I think a really important time of growth and evolution of that company and of that design team there. Went on to a shorter tenure, but also a fascinating one at Expedia, And in the last 3 years, I've been building a private practice as a consultant, as a leadership coach, and doing a lot of teaching and training of designers moving into leadership roles.
So I recall in 2015, I started hearing about that work at IBM, and that the goal was to make IBM a maybe design led company. Was it that broader remit, and to bring in something like 2,000 designers? And I
Yeah.
remember like my head exploding hearing about that.
Yeah,
And
this was a time. Now we're in an era where then there are numerous companies with that size and scale of design
mhm.
teams.
Pretty unusual
Thousands
then.
of designers. It's still
Yeah,
unusual, but it's not unheard of. At
right.
that time, 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, it was, and our original projection was 1,000 designers, and that just made people's heads fall off when we would talk about that in the industry, because this was an era when a large scale design team was maybe 200 or 300 designers, and here we were talking about kind of an exponential increase in that number, which was quite audacious, and it was one of the things, frankly, that drew me to the company and to the role at that time, because I thought, wow, this is nobody's ever done this before. I mean, how cool, how fun. There's no playbook for this. Let's go figure it out.
Well, I remember we had your colleague Phil Gilbert as on the program at the Enterprise UX conference back in 2015, and I know Adam Cutler, another colleague, I think spoke a year or two later. It was fascinating to see, and to also understand how to do this type of work in a setting that was both very traditional. IBM was probably in business for what, a good 80 years at that point, or no, more like
over
100,
100
right?
over 100 just had passed its century anniversary. Yeah.
And a huge, huge decentralized, to some degree, organization where you were trying to stand up something that was at least somewhat centralized, because it's hard to start without some sort of central infrastructure. I've got to think there are some really important lessons that you learned and that are going to make a lot of sense for people who are in design operations, but also people who are working with design operations, namely the leaders of the design orgs. And that's a
Hmm.
big theme that we're going to hit on at this year's summit, which is what we have a whole panel dedicated to this, actually. What do design leaders think, in effect, about design ops in 2025? It's going to be different, certainly, than the first year we did the summit, which was 2017. A lot has happened since then, but you kind of have a bit of a head start on many of us thanks to your experience at IBM and, of course, at Expedia. So you probably already know what's just starting to come around the bend for a lot of people today. So go ahead, get that crystal ball out and lay it on, Doug.
Well, one of the things that was fascinating about my role at IBM, and you just toggled between centralized and decentralized as far as the model of how design was organized at IBM. Just to kind of clarify that, initially when we launched the program in 2012, 2013, it was an intentionally centralized operation, and that was because the company had no capability to operationalize design at that time. So we needed to have a very tight hold on how design was being built, how teams were being organized, how designers were being recruited and integrated and onboarded into the company. And and we needed to ensure that the level of quality of talent, the practices of design were articulated in at the level that we needed to. We needed to do things like, for instance, there was no career framework for
Hmm.
designers at the company at that time. We needed to write that. We needed to author that and build that and socialize that. So first few years very tightly centralized. Then then we moved into more of a hybrid model where we were migrating designers out into the lines of business and establishing them as what I'll call semi-autonomous teams with design leadership overseeing and managing those teams out in the business and out in a line of business, and those designers and that design leader reporting up into the management structure of that line of business, as opposed to into the management structure of the centralized design program. Now, we kept that centralized operational team in place for my through my time there. Since I left in 2021, it's morphed a little bit from that model, but so we ended up with a tight um, uh, centralized operational team and design decentralized design teams across the business.
Okay, so obviously there's some stages of evolution there. What were the triggers? Did you consciously plan ahead for that evolution, or were you, you know, uh, finding that you had to make those changes in a more organic way? But what prompted those
I think that
departures?
the big idea, the big gesture was that there was a thumbnail sketch of that. That yes, over time we need to migrate designers. It doesn't make sense for us to have to hold all whatever it is, 1,000 designers in one centralized organization. The business needs to in order for this to thrive, the business needs to take ownership of and responsibility for the designers, their headcount, and also their output. And so we knew that was the trajectory that this needed to go. What we didn't know was when the time would be right for that to start happening. And one thing that we take away from that is that the answer to that was not the same for every part of the business. Um, and upon reflection, that's not entirely surprising because as you look back, it's revealed that all of these different parts of that wildly complex and scaled company were at different levels of maturity, different levels of sort of business development, scale, localization. There were all sorts of factors, domains that they were operating in different technical domains and market domains. So, there were all sorts of factors that we needed to be tracking to understand that okay, it's time now for this business unit to take on design and designers.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's most commonly credited, I think, to Bruce Sterling that the future is here. It's just unevenly distributed. Probably somebody else said it, but you had that situation where that future or that distribution was probably visible on the same corporate headquarters corridor. I mean, like you walk down the hall and there's someone from 1991, and
Yeah,
next door is someone from 2015. Um,
yeah.
I'm, thinking about the broader timeline that we've all been dealing with in the certainly last 10 years. I feel very much like there's been a major pivot in terms of seeing design and its various flavors as a role or even an identity to a point where it's a toolkit that lots of people have to have a level of competence in, but um, it's not necessarily such an important part of a professional's identity to say, oh, I'm an interaction designer or I'm a usability engineer or whatever it might be. When you were rolling out this entire hugely ambitious approach at IBM, was there was it very important for people that you were bringing on to really sort of be part of like a very clear IBM design community? Was it important for your design people to sort of be together in their own little sort of, I don't know, if IBM is a universe, I guess maybe they needed their own planet.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Uh, and part of that, I mean, um, think about a designer coming into that company in that era. Let's say it's 2014. We were hiring uh, um, primarily or heavily entry level emerging talent. So 1 or 2 years out of university. So for many of these designers, this was, their first big career job. And here they are coming into this company that at the time did not have, again, we didn't have a career framework. There was no culture of design at the company. We were building that in real time. And as they migrated out into the business, as we were engineering that migration, there was a real danger that they would get out into the you know the data storage unit of IBM, and they would get stranded out there like an
Mm-hmm.
island, and they would their work experience could could very well be a pretty rough one, because the people they were working with did not have an appreciation for an understanding of what they were doing. So we needed to create that community and that culture of design so that the designers were connected to each other. And we did that in a number of ways. One of which was for those uh, early career designers coming into the company. They spent um, they spent a couple of months with us in an onboarding boot camp. Um, that was intended to be kind of the bridge between the academic experience and the corporate experience. And there was some important sort of training and sort of integration that we were doing in those months. But uh, equally as important was connecting those designers to each other in a cohort experience,
Mm-hmm.
so that as 50 designers came into the company, they had those 2 months together. They really bonded. They really connected with each other. And then they went out into the company, they distributed across the company, but they still had that network that had been developed in the boot camp. That, to be honest, I don't think I fully appreciated how important that bond, that connection, that cultural energy would be until we got into this program by a couple of years, and we realized, hey, you know, people are kind of sticking with this. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're really committed to this company and this culture that we've built at a level that I frankly didn't expect.
Well, now 10, 12 years later, if you're going to do it again in today's environment, would you use a similar model? Would you do things differently? I don't know if you'd maybe put more emphasis on learning and development or tooling or what have you. What would be different given that it's a different time and maybe the way we relate to design, not just as people who are doing the work, but the people who are in the broader organization, how they relate to design. Would it be very different if you were starting a project like this now?
I think I I think fundamentally I would make a lot of the same moves. Um, I mean, the difference would be uh, when 12, 13 years ago when we started that program, we were prototyping every single day, every week, because we didn't know what was around the next corner. And so it was the first year and a half, even 2 years was pretty chaotic. It was really just, all right, what are we up against now? What's the new thing that we need to solve that just came into our field of vision yesterday? And now we suddenly have a whole set of new priorities as a result of that. I wish that we would have done a better job very early on of measuring, kind of establishing some baseline metrics for what how design was happening, what the conditions were. Um, we got better at that pretty quickly over time. But boy, if we would have had a just a real solid baseline of that first,
Mm.
those that first quarter or two, we would have an even better story to tell. Because if we kind of go back and we reconstruct some of it on reflection. But that's one thing that I do wish we would have had more. Again, it was so chaotic that it was hard to think that clearly in the moment, but I wish we would have.
Well, that'd be a good topic to come back to after we take a short break. Everyone, we're listening to, or you're listening to, the Rosenfeld Review. We're talking with Doug Powell. We'll be right back. Guess what's coming up? The 9th Design Ops Summit, taking place virtually September 10th and 11th. If you are not just a design ops pro, but a research operations person, if you're interested in content operations, product operations, this 2-day conference has so much for you. It's centered on 8 meaty case studies about what people are doing in design operations, really the cutting edge stuff, best practices. But we're also going to have 2 fantastic panels and featured speakers, Doug Powell and Alni Figueroa. And of course, no Rosenfeld conference is complete without a bunch of really interesting workshops. Come check it out. We want you there. You're going to want to be there. The 2025 Design Ops Summit taking place virtually September 10th and 11th. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Doug Powell. We are talking about your experience primarily at IBM and some of the lessons from that with that huge initiative to really make IBM more of a design-led organization, and some of the ins and outs of how you rolled that out, centralized initially, increasingly a bit more decentralized, or really more of a hybrid. And then we were going to talk a little bit about for people who are kind of at this today. It's a different time. You mentioned metrics as an area that you felt maybe it's not the most important thing, but looking back on it, you wished you would have really invested a bit more in that, especially for benchmarking. What are some of the metrics you think really are table stakes for anyone in a large design organization, especially in design ops?
Yeah, well, it's interesting looking back on that arc of my years there. As I said, we in my assessment didn't do a good enough job early on, but um, in 2018 we had a really interesting independent study conducted by Forrester Research on the program and practice of human-centered design at IBM. And they really both the outcomes of that study um, uh, really revealed to us the both the opportunity for for how design can be measured, but also the outcomes of that were pretty compelling. And they were paying attention to things like how aligned a cross-functional technical team, including product design and engineering, are how aligned those three functional areas are,
Hmm.
and and finding that teams practicing human-centered design um, at IBM and with IBM practices at other companies um, were 80% more aligned than previously. So that alignment then improved the velocity, the speed with which the teams were moving from idea to market. There was measurable improvement in risk mitigation. So, in other words, the risk that a crappy user experience or a crappy product was going to go out to market and then have to be redone, which is a very expensive prospect. That risk was lowered measurably by the practice of human-centered design because we're so much more in touch with the users, with the customers. Um, Ultimately, there were uh, financial returns. So Forrester found that the ROI on human-centered design practice at this level in this way was over 300%. So we've got alignment, we've got velocity, we've got risk mitigation, we've got financial ROI. Those are four things that any CEO, any general manager, any CFO at virtually any company is going to be, that's going to catch their attention. That is what they are thinking about. How can I get my teams to move faster? How can I get them to be more on target? And how can I, operate my business in a more cost-efficient way? So that was a very powerful study for us that really got us like focused on some important business critical metrics that really became the template for how we operated from that time forward.
Those are fantastic. I mean, if we had more time, I'd love to dig into the alignment metric a little bit because I'm
Mhm.
curious how Forrester was measuring that. I could see that taking a lot of different paths, but let's bring it back to design ops. So you've just outlined a really good set of metrics at a broad level that really any organization should be considering, and the people in design ops are often charged with really, if not conceiving of the metrics, implementing them, measuring them, tracking them. Do you feel that the contemporary practice of design operations is up to the task from what you can see?
Yes, yes. Generally speaking, I think it is. I think we've got the raw material. We've got the practices have evolved to a level where a strong design ops leader or small team of design ops practitioners, they've got the resources out there to develop a really potent and important practice in virtually any condition. Now, the key is, what are the conditions?
Hmm.
Because not every set of metrics, and we're just talking about one aspect of design ops here, measuring the value of the work. Um, the conditions that that team is operating in and that design ops practice is operating in are that is essential. And there are, you know it, there are a dozen or more different, sort of diagnostic questions that we can be asking or should be asking to determine what are the right set of metrics that we should be applying? What are the right set of design ops? How should I be prioritizing our practice for these particular set of conditions?
It's interesting because those are the kind of questions that are really hard for people in the middle, deep into the work, to step back and ask. Um, I mean, you folks had help from Forrester, obviously, that was very beneficial, as you mentioned earlier. Um, listen, if we could hire the Forresters of the world to help us, that's great. But barring that, is there any advice you would have as someone who has been both on the inside and the outside, especially in your consulting now? If you were, well, let me put it to you this way: if I was your a design ops pro or a design leader, and I came to you for advice, what would be the sort of framing questions that you would use to help me step back and see what I should be measuring?
Well, I actually wrote a piece on this recently, so I'll borrow from some thoughts that I've already put out there. But I think design leaders always need to be kind of assessing in the real time conditions of their teams, of the program that they're leading, and really understanding the nuances of the levels of maturity that they're operating at. This could be, for instance, what is the scale of my team? Where am I in the trajectory of where is my team in the trajectory of growth? Are we growing? Are we contracting? Are we stable? What is the acceptance and understanding of design elsewhere in the company? Are we constantly out there pioneering and making the case for design, or do the cross-functional leaders across the company have a basic understanding and appreciation for the value of what we do? The answer to those questions will give you a whole different set of priorities for how you should be investing specifically in design ops, but in other areas of your program as well.
Well, that's great. Those are just like fantastically useful questions. And uh, again, we'll mention that Doug is going to be giving the closing talk at this year's Design Ops Summit on September 11th. Design Ops and the Next Frontier, leading through an unpredictable change. And I think those questions that you just listed are really the roadmap through dealing with uncertainty. All that unpredictable change, you have to constantly be asking questions and assessing and even measuring performance. That's the only way you can really get through things. When everything else is outside your control, you can at least control your ability to ask questions and assess. Doug, it's been wonderful talking with you, but before we let you go, what's the gift you brought for our listeners?
Thanks, Lou. Great to speak with you. And I'd like to recommend a book that I've recently read. I like to recommend to designers and design leaders books and resources that are not necessarily design oriented. And this is one of those. It's the memoir by the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. And it's called A Different Kind of Power. And she speaks very eloquently and from her own experiences about her brand of leadership, which includes curiosity, which includes humility, which includes listening very carefully and very clearly, which includes storytelling. All of these qualities that I find are very present in great designers and great design leaders. And so I found that book to be very relevant, even though it's not an obvious design-oriented book. So I'd recommend that one.
Great recommendation. Great conversation, Doug. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Rosenfeld Review.
Great. Thank you, Lou.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the latest Rosenfeld Review. Really appreciate it. Before you go, I want to remind you that there's something you're going to want to check out if you haven't already. It is called the Rosenverse. Wonder how we came up with that name. It is your hub for all things UX and product design. It's a subscription platform with both free and premium options that has been trained and built on all the goodness that we've been putting out at Rosenfeld Media for years and years. So what does that mean? It's a couple of Rosenverse live sessions every week that you can attend. It is hundreds of those recordings and hundreds of recordings from all of our conferences going back 10 years. And you may know that we do 4 conferences a year. It's also got this great chat bot called the Rosenbot that's trained on all of that, plus our 65 and growing collection of the best books out there on user experience. It's all there. There's some great discounts as well on books and workshops and our conference tickets. Check it all out. It's all there for you. It is waiting. It's there right now. And even if you have a free tier subscription, you're going to get incredible value from the Rosenverse and the Rosenbot. Go to rosenverse.rosenfeldmedia.com. Start it today.